Neuroscience, quantum physics, and creating the life of your dreams. This is Robert Manni, host of Guys TV, and this week my special guest is Dr. Larry Farwell. We're going to talk about science and spirituality right here, right now on Guys TV. You can also catch me on KCAA Radio here in Southern California and Guys Radio, my worldwide podcast. Guys TV, Guys Radio, thanks for your support. Okay, Guys Radio today with my special guest. His name is Dr. Larry Farwell. We're going to talk about the science of creating miracles. We're going to talk about creating miracles in your own life and living the life of your dreams. Let me tell you a little bit about our guest, Dr. Larry Farwell. He is just an amazing guy, and he's written this amazing book, bestseller book. It's called The Science of Creating Miracles, Neuroscience, Quantum Physics, and Living the Life of Your Dreams. He's Harvard-educated neuroscientist, and he teaches practical techniques that you can apply to live your best life. And it's really interesting stuff, and the book is very digestible. I highly recommend it. Based on his own groundbreaking scientific research, Dr. Farwell weaves together neuroscience, quantum physics, and the expansion of consciousness and effective techniques you can try to help you live your best extraordinary life. Time magazine selected Dr. Larry to the top 100 next wave top innovators of the century, the Picassos and Einsteins of the 21st century. That's pretty amazing. He's been all over media, CBS News, ABC, 60 Minutes, 48 Hours. The list goes on and on. He's consulted with everybody from individuals, corporations, top government leaders, including a president of the United States. He's conducted pioneering research on neuroscience, quantum physics, and the role of consciousness in human life and the universe. He also created something called brain fingerprinting, which is a scientific technique that helps determine if somebody is innocent or guilty. It's pretty provocative stuff. We'll talk about that. And he also invented the first brain-computer interface, which allowed paralyzed patients to use brain waves to communicate through a computer and a speech synthesizer. Let's put it this way. Dr. Larry Farwell is a really smart guy, and I'm so pleased he's on Guys Radio. Welcome to the show, Dr. Larry.
Thank you, Robert. I'm delighted to be here, and thank you for the kind introduction.
Okay, let's get right to it. So practical techniques you can learn to apply. The Science of Creating Miracles is a provocative title of your book. What inspired you to write it and then not write it? And what's this book all about?
All right. The book is all about, well, it's pretty much contained in the title, The Science of Creating Miracles, Neuroscience, Quantum Physics, and Living the Life of Your Dreams. And what it's about is primarily, it's about experience. It's about teaching people to use their brain and to use the realities of quantum physics to live a life that's more fulfilling and more successful. I wrote it because I had done the research and seen the results and tried the techniques out with many of my clients over the years. And it seemed to be useful stuff in my own life and in other people's lives. So I wrote a book about it.
Amazing. So quantum physics, science, and spirituality. What I find great is that you manage to synthesize how they work together, because they do. And I've interviewed so many metaphysical teachers on my show, as well as people in the science and quantum physics area. And everybody's kind of saying the same thing. And I don't say that to diminish it, but they're offering up in a different way. So what is the relationship then, from your perspective, Dr. Farwell, between quantum physics, science, and spirituality? How do they work together?
All right. Well, that's probably one of the most profound questions throughout history. So I'll try to be brief here. I'm going to geek out for just a minute on the science of what is the real physical world. This is not woo-woo. This is physics. So I'm knocking on this desk here. You can hear me knocking on it. You could see it if the camera was pointing down a little further. It appears to be brown and solid and separate from the air around it. If you look a little closer, you'll see that it's not at all solid. It's mostly empty space. There are molecules moving around really fast in there. You look within those, you see atoms. You look within those, you'll see elementary particles, protons, neutrons, electrons. You look within those, you'll see quarks. You look more carefully at the quarks, and down to the level of strings here, you'll see vibrating strings. So what the physical universe consists of is really just patterns of vibrations. Now, what is it that's vibrating? It's the unified field that gives rise to all the particle wave phenomena that make up the physical creation. I mean, that's hardcore physics. It's not, again, that's not woo-woo. Now, what all the great spiritual traditions tell us is that the unified field, the unified field, or whatever it is, the field of nature that gives rise to the physical creation, is the same as that inner field of pure consciousness that we can contact within ourselves. Consciousness is the essential constituent of human life. That inner field of pure consciousness that is our essential constituent of our life. That's the thing we have all throughout life, all the time, all the same. That inner field is the same as what gives the field, what we now call the conscious unified field that gives rise to creation. So we decided to test that in the physics laboratory, and it also follows that if ourselves, our own consciousness, is the same as the source of creation, we ought to be able to make a difference in creation simply using the level of our consciousness. Now, if you go to the latest book that came out last week, or the scriptures from 1 or 5 or 10,000 years ago, they'll say you create this vision on the level of your consciousness, you move nature in that vision, and then that shows up in your life. Well, we decided to put that to the test in the laboratory.
Okay, so it sounds like that there is a collective agreement in terms of why the desk is the desk and the video is the video, but when you break it all down, everything's kind of separate, but it's together also as a tone, or like a string on the guitar. There's a vibration, but it's all goes down to like a tone, I guess. So how important is this, our trying to live our best lives and work with this energy and these vibratory fields, the difference between the collective agreement and what we individually agree to? Because so much of what we experience is based on what we've collectively agreed to. So sometimes, it's easy once you can get into your technique in terms of, okay, I'm going into that space and then I can create things. But getting to that space, as simple as the process is described in your book, because of our collective agreements, it may be difficult to kind of get off the starting mark there. Help me out with that.
Sure. Well, one of the things that helps us get off the starting mark is having a scientific explanation for what's going on. I mean, there are a lot of people who have tremendous high level of consciousness experiences, and they know that they're real, but how does anybody else know that they're real? So what we put to the test is essentially miracles. You mentioned a vibrating string. If you pluck a guitar string, it sets up a resonant frequency. Well, we can do the same thing on the level of our consciousness. And if that resonant frequency, if there's something else in the environment, another instrument with a similar resonance, it'll pick up that resonance. So we can create a resonant frequency on the level of our consciousness, and that will move the conscious unified field in that, and it shows up in our environment. That's how we create our lives. Now, how do you test that in the laboratory? Well, in the laboratory, you need mathematics and statistics. If you're going to say this thing is real, you've got to be able to quantify it. So I think everyone has had some kind of experience that might be related to consciousness, like I'd really like to hear from Joe, and the phone rings and it's Joe, but you don't know the probability. So that's not really a scientific experiment, although everyone I think has had experiences like that enough they think, well, there's something going on there. So what we did is we took something where we know the probability. We know precisely the probability distribution of alpha particle emission by plutonium. It's one of the main ingredients of an atomic bomb. My dad went on the Manhattan Project when he was still a graduate student. He's a physicist by profession. And we decided to set up an experiment to see if we could shift the probability distribution of this quantum mechanical event, alpha particle emission by plutonium. And to cut to the chase, we found that we could. We could make tremendously improbable shifts. We could create tremendously improbable events. Now, what is a miracle? It used to be thought that a miracle was something that went outside the laws of science. But in quantum mechanics, anything is possible. Nothing is impossible. It's just some things are highly improbable. So a miracle in the real quantum mechanical world is simply a highly improbable event. Well, what we showed is in the laboratory, using nuclear physics apparatus, that you can create extremely improbable events, miracles by the quantum mechanical definition of miracles, simply by using consciousness alone and creating that vision on the level of your consciousness. So that is really what human life is about. What we're all about is creating vision on the level of our consciousness and manifesting that in the world. And what we showed in the laboratory is that that is a real phenomenon. Now, I'm sure you've had many people here on the show who have talked about essentially what I would call creating miracles, but using your consciousness to create the life of your dreams. Well, what we've shown is that that's actually real, it's repeatable, it's measurable in the laboratory. So that is what can, getting back to your question, that is what can give people the confidence to actually practice techniques of higher consciousness that have a real effect in physical creation and in creating the life of your dreams.
Amazing. Okay, my special guest on Guys Radio is Dr. Larry Farwell. The name of the book is The Science of Creating Miracles. It's broken into a number of sections: quantum physics, the science of creating miracles, scientific research on the science of creating miracles, experiential techniques for applying the science of creating miracles, and examples of how these principles have been applied. So basically, what Dr. Farwell does, what you do is you break it down for everybody, you show the research, and then you teach people how to do it. And it sounds to me like you have to get yourself into a quiet state to be able to get in touch with yourself and get in touch with the universal consciousness and to be able to make changes. Could you pick it up from there?
Sure. Well, here we have not only quantum physics to deal with, we also have the human brain to deal with. And let's look for a minute when we're talking about, okay, how do you get into this state where you can really command the universe? Let's talk for a minute about how the brain learns. So we're crawling around, and I'm a neuroscientist by profession, so this is what I study. And I study brainwaves, electrical brain activity. So you're 2 years old, you're crawling around on the floor. You crawl around on the kitchen floor, you grab the kitchen table leg, you touch the wall, you touch the floor, not really much of interest there, you don't learn much. It's just, you're sort of on normal autopilot. However, when you touch the hot stove burner, at that moment, you have an aha experience. The brain, in effect, wakes up. Now the brain is open for reprogramming. Now there's some information here that I really need to know. I need to create a shift in the way I'm relating to the world here. So that aha experience is accompanied by a phenomenon in the brain, which I've spent a large part of my career studying, which is called, it's a pattern in the brainwaves, because brainwaves are electrical activity measured from outside. Right. So when your brain does certain information processing activities, you get certain patterns. Well, this particular phenomenon that comes along with an aha experience, it's called a memory and encoding related multifaceted electroencephalographic response, MER, or murmur. So when you have a murmur moment, when you touch the hot stove, when something really gets your attention, it opens your brain up for reprogram. So one of the, something practical, you're talking about practical techniques, something practical which we can teach people here on this show, has to do with taking advantage of that phenomenon and taking advantage of how the brain works to get into a state where you're actually more able to create the result you desire.
Let me give you a personal example, and maybe we can talk about it. One of the things you mentioned in the book, which I think is so true, is, we shouldn't shy away from really negative things happening, because ultimately they can be triggers for the type of activity that we want. They can be kind of wake-up calls. And I'll give you an example. I was out running 8 years ago. I had tremendous pain in my side. I had to lay down. It was like unbearable. It was for hours and hours and hours. I went in and I found out that I had a kidney stone, but I also had a small growth on each kidney, and I had to get robotic surgery. Well, that was 8 years ago. And fortunately, they found a little bit of stuff then, and that was it. And I decided to change my lifestyle and also go into innovative medicine or Ayurvedic medicine to make sure that my internal landscape, if you will, was cleaned up and I could live a better life, because I figured, well, if something could grow in the landscape environment I had, it could happen again. So I changed. Then a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, I had a similar situation happen where I had unbearable pain. I was writhing on the floor. I had to get rushed to the hospital, and I had my appendix taken out right before it was ready to burst. And while I was in pain in my apartment, I started to leave my body. And I realized, like, I better get hold of this. And I pulled myself back in, and a voice came to me and said, don't drink alcohol. Now, I never had an issue with alcohol, but I worked in the business, and of course I was around it all the time, and I stopped. And I haven't had a drop since, because I figured, when you hear a voice like that, I think it would be foolish to doubt it. But my point is, these were both triggering incidents that came with a lot of pain, but turned out to allow me to make behavioral change. Now, I'm not suggesting, as I don't think you are, that you have to go through an incredible amount of pain, but sometimes these type of experiences that are traumatic, if you will, at the time, turn out to be opportunities.
Yes. Well, brilliant. And let's look at some smaller opportunities that we have every day that correlate exactly with what you were talking about just now and what I was speaking about just a moment ago. All the time, day in and day out, there situations come along that are a bit challenging. Somebody at work or somebody in your personal life or your significant other says or does something that really gets to you, that triggers you. You're upset, you're angry, you're afraid, you're out of balance. Now, look again back to how the brain learns. That is a murmur moment. That's like touching the hot stove. Now, something has gotten your attention. Now, what many people do is they use that to go into reaction mode and shoot the messenger or punish the messenger or take it externally. I'm going to fix you so you never do that again or say that again, so I won't have to experience this painful thing. Or they take it internally. Oh, maybe I really am a horrible person. Now, there's another option, and that I call transmutation trigger. And this is something that your clients here, your listeners can practice. When you get a murmur moment like that, when somebody says something that triggers you, instead of reacting to it, take a moment to consider reality. Take a moment to tune into who you really are. I mean, at essence, you really are this conscious unified field. When something comes along that triggers you, it usually appears to be an attack on your safety, your value, or your power. So at essence, you're this unbounded field that creates a whole universe. Tune into what it really feels like to be the real you. Instead of reacting, tune into, okay, what's the reality here? This appeared to be a threat to my safety or power or value, but it really wasn't. The real me is 100% safe, 100% valuable, 100% powerful. Tune into that level of your own life before you react, before you respond, and then function from that level. Use this murmur moment, because it opens up your brain for reprogramming. Use this murmur moment to tune into who you really are. And then you come out of that experience with a more powerful experience of yourself. We carry around within us an inner blueprint that says we're only maybe 70% powerful and 65% safe and 40% valuable. But in reality, we're 100% powerful, safe, and valuable. So we're a little bit out of sync with our true blueprint. And the result is we set up that less than 100% valuable, safe, and powerful resonance on our consciousness. And then it shows up in our environment. And now we have all kinds of evidence. So I'm not really so valuable after all. I'm not so safe after all. And so I'm not so powerful after all. So what we do to take advantage of these murmur moments is tune into the reality. Something comes along that triggers you, tune into that level of your life. Let your mind quiet down a little. Let your awareness settle down experience who you really are, and then you're transmuting your inner blueprint from being less than 100% safe, valuable, and powerful to the real you. So you come out of that experience just as you, on the physical level, you came out of that experience realizing some inner purification could help you there. You come out purified, you come out harmonized, you come out more strongly attuned to your true value, power, and safety, more strongly attuned to your true blueprint. Then you're radiating this true blueprint, and lo and behold, in the environment, you get more evidence. Oh, I really am more valuable. I really am 100% safe. I really am 100% powerful. So you've used this negative experience to create a shift. And what that means is that all these experiences people used to try to avoid, oh man, somebody's going to say something nasty about me. When that experience comes up, you start to have a murmur moment. You're going to start to get a little smile around your face because you're going to be, aha, this is an opportunity. So you're spot on.
How about the notion, Dr. Larry, where people seem to experience the same issues over and over again until we kind of conquer them? So you deal with a certain type of person, that's a trigger, and then maybe you move away, and then you come up with somebody else who does the same annoying thing. And it's like, why does this keep coming up? I find for myself, if my day starts to go off bad and I start thinking this day is not going in the right direction, I have to get hold of it. And I have to take myself down and say, okay, I'm going to turn this into a good day by connecting with the universal energy and love that I am, that I come from, and that'll make my day start to get better. And invariably it works, but sometimes it's not an easy task where one thing is on top of another. It's like a snowball effect. And everybody goes through this where, oh no, this is a situation that always seems, why does this always seem to happen to me? Talk to us.
Okay, great. Well, brilliant. You brought up another benefit of this transmutation trigger technique, because what happens is that, just as you've said, you get away from the person who seemed to have caused this problem. I think about the early years of my life. The villains whose fault it was kept changing, but the play was the same. Right. And I start, okay, what is, as a scientist, what is the common denominator here? Well, I'm the common denominator. So when you have one of these murmur moments, when something really gets to you, when it triggers you, when you have this aha experience, there's another aspect to it that you've brought out. And that is, there's something in you that's resonating with. Not only it gives you an opportunity to tune into your true self, it gives you an opportunity to have some insight into, okay, what is it? What is it within myself that's drawing this to me? Somebody comes in and says, well, I don't like your hair. I don't like the way you dress. Now, if somebody came up to you and said, Robert, you have the ugliest red hair I've ever seen, that wouldn't create a murmur. You say, okay, well, this person, maybe they have different views about hair than I do, or maybe they just don't see very well, whatever it is. So if something actually triggers you, that gives you some information. Oh, okay, there's something in me that's associating my value with this particular thing. I'll give you an example from my life. I was with a young woman that I was interested in and just getting to know, and we'd just been out in my boat, and we were on my dock, and a guy came by in a paddleboard or a canoe and said, when are you going to get rid of that piece of shit boat out of there? I don't like looking at it. And so my first trigger was, oh man, this guy has threatened my value, my boat, which is almost the same thing. Not only that, he threatened my safety. He's threatened my power. He's threatened, potentially, this is a woman I'm interested in front of her. He's potentially threatened my whole line of ancestry, my whole line of genealogy down into the future. So it felt like an existential threat to my life. And I thought, okay, my first trigger was, okay, I've got to knock this guy out of his canoe. Then, fortunately, I took a moment to, all right, is this guy's view of my boat, is this guy coming along and expressing a negative view of my boat, is that actually a threat to me? Is that actually a threat to my relationship with this woman? Is that actually a threat to my power, my safety? Obviously, Some guy having an opinion on my boat was not a threat to any of those things. So what I did is, Shana, you've described. I tuned in. Okay, how's a real Larry Farwell going to be functioning here? Well, I'm 100% safe, 100% valuable, 100% powerful. This guy is irrelevant. I can simply go back to enjoying a lovely afternoon with a lovely young woman on my dock. Now, that was a practical instance in my life where I could have ended up either getting really upset and creating a scene with this guy and spending a lot of time, effort, and energy on something that wasn't real, or I could tune into reality. The truth will set you free. Sometimes it's challenging because you have to wake up and realize what's going on first. But once you wake up, you realize what you're tuning into is reality. You really are 100% safe, powerful, valuable. This guy with his opinion, whatever it is, really has nothing to do with you. So tuning into the reality is not that difficult once you wake up. And by practicing these techniques, you wake up sooner and sooner. And you realize, oh yeah, this is not really a threat to my power, safety, or value.
That's a great example. I actually had the exact same thing happen yesterday. I was pulling into where I live, and there was a new neighbor coming in, and the moving van was parked in front of my spot. So I said, "Hey, could you move your van? You're in front of my spot." And the young guy, looks at me and he's like, "Say please." And I said, "Say please." And he's like, "There you go." So he moved it. He goes, "I'm working." I said, "Well, I live here, so thank you." I said, "I'm going to be leaving." Then he pulls back in front after I pull in. I said, "I'm going to be leaving here in 20 minutes. He goes, "Well, you tell me, and then I'll pull out again." So it would have been very easy to get into it with him. And I didn't say anything. I said, "Okay." I went inside and I took myself down a little bit. And sure enough, when I went outside 20 minutes later, he had moved, the van had already been moved. And I realized it wasn't worth that. But, we live in a time, Dr. Larry, that there's so much triggering going on now, more than ever right now. And it's so important for people. I have found for myself, meditation, daily meditation, get up early, do some meditation, has really been a difference maker for me. What would you suggest to people and my listeners and audience out there, because it feels like everybody's under attack from fear-based thinking, and everybody freaking out right now because they don't feel like they have value. They don't feel like they're in control. What would be your advice?
All right. Well, a couple of things. I strongly agree about meditation. I practice transcendental meditation every morning, first thing. I then exercise, then I eat a really healthy meal. And so whatever happens the rest of the day, at least I've gotten a good start.
Love it.
In Science of Creating Miracles, in my book, in my workshops, I teach some more involved techniques. There's one called energized transmutation, which I'm not going to show you here. It would take maybe 20 or 30 minutes, but it is outlined in the book, and I teach it in my workshops. It's a technique to gain command of the subtle energies of your body, and also to open your consciousness to this inner field of pure consciousness and function from that level. But also, when you tune in, whatever technique you're using, when you tune into who you truly are, when you tune into the inner field of pure consciousness, you set up a resonant frequency that's in tune with you and in tune with nature. And anything that is out of tune with you, or out of tune with nature, out of tune with your true resonance, starts to be moved out. And so all of these techniques of meditation, the techniques that I teach for energized transmutation, they all not only get you into a state where you're more in harmony with yourself and with nature, more in tune with your own true resonance, your own true vibrating guitar string, but also they remove the dysresonances. And you talked about that on the physical level. You talked about that with respect to your experience. Whatever it was that might have triggered you the next time somebody shows up with a van, that was diminished because you had tuned into a more powerful, more harmonious frequency within yourself.
Amazing. Now, you talk about, again, my special guest, and I'm loving this conversation, Dr. Larry Farwell. The name of the book, once again, is The Science of Creating Miracles. We're talking about neuroscience, quantum physics, living the life you want to really live right now in these trying, challenging times, which, of course, can be an opportunity. You mentioned truth, Dr. Farwell, the importance of truth and being truthful with yourself. Talk to us about that.
All right. It's easy to be who you are. It's difficult to be who you're not. Now, a lot of people, and I look at myself in the past, I'm in this boat too, or have been. A lot of people spend a lot of time, effort, and energy in what I would call image management, trying to convince people that, trying to impress people. A lot of people spend a lot of time, effort, and energy trying to convince people that they're that person that they pretend to be on Facebook. If people saw the real truth about me, that gosh, they would they wouldn't be so impressed. So they spend a lot of energy trying to first you look at this person, you try to figure out, okay, what is this person going to be impressed by? What is this person going to have a positive opinion of me by? What is this person going to want to treat me better by? And then I try to be that way. There's a tremendous amount of effort in that. Whereas if you're simply true to your true resonance, if you simply radiate who you are. I mean, I have a friend. I spend a lot of time outdoors. Right now, I'm on a boat. I love all kinds of outdoor activities. I have a friend who thinks that the outdoors is something that you drive through to get to the next opera house. He's the opera. Now, if he met, say he met some woman he was interested in who liked the outdoors, he could pretend to be this outdoor guy, but he'd be much better off saying, "Hey, I love opera," and either somebody would resonate with that.
Sing outdoors.
Yeah. So if we're true to who we really are and simply express, this is what resonates with me, you're going to attract people who just love you just the way you are. You'll be able to be who you are. You don't have to try to be someone else. So the truth will set you free. Being true to who you are and letting it out, letting people see, oh yeah, this is a real me. Then either one of two things will happen. Either they'll really resonate with that, or it turns out that there's someone who doesn't so much resonate with you, in which case you'll find yourself not so much together, and that's actually a benefit for both of you.
And the other thing is that you'll get to know yourself, who you are, a lot better. And
Really?
having dealt in the relationship field quite frequently from my book and from earlier shows, it's amazing how many people want to date, want to meet somebody, and they don't take that first step of going inside and saying, who am I? What do I want? What do I have to offer? Before just jumping into the pool, the dating pool, blindly and just swimming around and saying, oh, before they get overwhelmed. So it's really important for people to take a moment and step back and ask, who am I? And what do I have? What do I like about myself? What do I need to work on? Just be honest with yourself. It's so much easier, as you say. It takes a lot of effort to lie. You mentioned something in the book called the superposition. I spontaneously create a life that corresponds with my true nature. I think it's so important, that superposition, to get yourself into, to be able to reprogram and create these changes. Could you share some of that insight with us, Dr. Larry?
Sure, be happy to. First of all, the word superposition comes from quantum mechanics. And in quantum mechanics, when a system is in a state where all possibilities are there at once, it's called superposition. And then you make an observation, and that collapses into one configuration of particle wave phenomena. So the superposition, state of superposition from quantum mechanics in a physics lab, is a state in which you have all the potential of the conscious unified field, but it hasn't collapsed into a specific outcome yet. So we can tune, since we are that conscious unified field, we can tune into that state of superposition within ourselves. Sometimes I like the word superposition because it sounds sort of like a superhero in some very heroic kind of pose. But what it really means is, on the level of consciousness, being tuned into who you really are. It's very similar to what you just described. Tune into the real you, tune into your own resonant frequency, tune into that level, that very quiet level of your life where you're in tune with nature, where you're in tune with your own consciousness. The intellect may shout The emotions may scream, the intuition whispers. So when we're tuning in, when we're doing the process you described, tuning into who you really are, you pick that up on the level of quietness, on the level of letting go, not on the level of pushing on the emotion level or the intellectual level. So tuning into that quiet level of your life attunes you to that field of superposition, which then you have all the possibilities at once, and you can make choices and you can go in the direction that most is in tune with you.
So how can people then, how can our audience know when they're in superposition? Because so many times when you're meditating or you're asking for some type of universal consciousness to give you some insights on something, you're saying, am I speaking to myself? Is this monkey chatter? Is this because I just watched this movie or whatever? Or how do I know to trust this is the real me and the connectivity I have to universal consciousness and knowledge?
All right. Brilliant question. You know that on a very quiet level of intuition. It's not something you can figure out, because the intellect can go on endlessly. It's not something that you're going to have a big emotion about. There's sort of a paradox here, that the quieter your awareness is, the more you know, because the closer you are to your own self, which is this unbounded consciousness, the closer you are to the conscious unified field, which is the source of creation. So the way you know that, I can't, no one can give a formula, okay, check box X, Y, and Z, and that'll be it, because you know it on the level of yourself. And the way that you enhance that ability or unfold that ability is by practicing your tuning into your intuition, and then you discover things really go your way. You discover you've really discovered truth. Now, I've had the experience, and maybe you have too, of tuning into my intuition. I just have a sense, oh yes, this is it. And then the intellect comes in and says, well, wait, but what about this? What about this? And I make the opposite. I use my intellect to overpower my intuition. That ends up being a mistake. So you learn to trust your intuition by trusting your intuition, by tuning into your intuition, and then going with that subtle feeling that you have, and you discover things work out right. And it's a matter of practice. It's like riding a bicycle or a surfboard or something. You get better and better as you use your intuition more and more.
Do you ever find that sometimes where you get that two like little birds on each shoulder, sometimes it's better just not to do anything. If you don't have to make a decision right then and there, sometimes just wait, and you might be taking a shower or you're out for a run or whatever, and then all of a sudden, bang, you get an insight that has to do with what you had been kind of wrestling with.
Brilliant. Yes. The thing is, again, you get that refined awareness, you get that intuition on the level of letting go. So when you're wrestling with something, your intellect is going to be really active. Your emotions are likely going to be really active. You're going to be on the surface level of life. Then you said maybe you're running, exercising, taking a shower, or maybe relaxing just before you go to sleep, or waking up with a quiet mind in the morning, and the insight comes to you. It's because it's a very useful technique to not try to come to an intuitive solution when you're wrestling with somebody, when your awareness is not so clear. And if you don't have to, if there's not something pressing at the moment, a moment will come when your awareness is spontaneously settled down. You're letting go. You're not holding on. You're not forcing. And at that moment, the insight comes to you. Mm-hmm. Nature works on nature's time. So it may be you have some vision, you have some question, you have some inquiry, and you let it out there to nature. And then it at some time when your awareness is quiet enough to pick up on the answer, then is when it comes to you.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Okay. We talked about the book, The Science of Creating Miracles. I want to, if it's okay with you, let's take just a few minutes and just talk about some of the parts of your very interesting life. You have advised presidents. What happened there? Which president, if you're free to say that, and what did they call you for, if you're allowed to say that?
All right. Well, I can say a little bit.
Okay.
This was actually President George W. Bush. And I invented a technique called brain fingerprinting, which allows you to detect concealed information stored in the brain. So I met with President Bush and also the director of the CIA. to design a program, and then the rest of this is going to be classified, to design a program to use this in counterterrorism. Because in terrorist activity, though the end perpetrators probably don't survive the event anyway, or they get caught, but the masterminds, they can continue to create havoc. However, if they stored all the information about their crimes on their laptops, it'd be easy. We just scan the laptops, but they don't. They do, however, have a record of everything they've planned, even if they weren't there. Everything they planned, they have that record stored in their brain. So brain fingerprinting allows us to detect the concealed information stored in the brain, and that way we can identify the higher level bad guys. In terrorism, I've caught serial killers. I've helped to free innocent people who didn't commit the crime that they're convicted of. So the president and the director of the CIA and myself designed a program to apply this in counterterrorism. And all that has been classified, and I haven't been able to talk about it for years. However, we've been very successful in the counterterrorism field around the world. And now, just a few months ago, an article came out in a scientific journal about that program. And the details were withheld, but we were able to, I can talk about it a little bit now, because it came out how we were able to design brain fingerprinting tests to detect the mastermind behind terrorist mass shootings, terrorist hijackings, multiple bombings, and so on, by the records stored in their brain. And again, I can't go into the details of the specific cases, but in this scientific article, it shows how we were able to use their brainwaves to detect this information. And that has been the biggest terrorist problems are the ones that we solve because we catch the bad guys before they do it. And we've done that quite a lot overseas, especially in the Middle East, in ways that will never get to the newspapers. And then we've solved a bunch of these terrorist crimes that were in the newspapers and the news. So that is where the brain fingerprinting aspect and the U.S. president aspect.
That is like remote viewing on steroids. It's like unbelievable because remote viewing is pretty commonplace now, and it's not that it's a common thing, but it's used by everybody now. I mean, all the different countries are using it, and it's used in business and other stuff. But brain fingerprinting, it's like, wow, that's Minority Report. Can you just elaborate a little bit on if somebody is someplace else, how do you get to their brain waves?
Okay, well, actually, in order to conduct brain fingerprinting tests, we have to actually have a suspect there. We actually have to have a headset on their head, and we their brainwaves. One of the first studies I did was with the FBI, where we presented information on a computer screen that only an FBI agent would know due to their unique training. And when they saw that information, they had an aha experience. They had a murmur moment, like what we were talking about before. And so we pick up that pattern. We can say that guy's an FBI agent. Similarly, we can say that guy's an ISIS-trained terrorist. That guy was a mastermind behind a particular terrorist activity. That guy was a serial killer who was at this scene of this crime. Or that guy's innocent. He wasn't there. He didn't do it.
That is absolutely amazing stuff. You are incredible. Keep doing what you're doing. My special guest, Dr. Larry Farwell. This book is called The Science of Creating Miracles, Neuroscience, Quantum Physics, and Living the Life of Your Dreams, and so much more. Tell everybody where they can learn more about you, Dr. Farwell.
My website is drlarryfarwell.com, drlarryfarwell.com.
Just amazing. You're just doing amazing work. I hope you come back here because I got another 30 questions to ask you, and I want to learn a lot more, and you're doing great work. So thank you so much for being my special guest on Guys Radio, and I hope to see you again.
Thank you. Delightful being here.
If you enjoy the content and interviews I do each and every week on Guys Radio and TV, please support me by subscribing to our channels. Thanks so much.